Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Where we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode. Last episode, I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, are the brother sisters really behind this? Or, like, because especially the shot went off, it's like, oh, was that a real shot? Or was that them trying to film something artistic? And in the moment, that was my immediate thought. Turns out there actually was a shot fired. And Glenn and Zach got hit, which I thought was so interesting. Because now you're also like, oh, because I forgot what Howard said. He's like, oh my God, they've been shot. And it turns out it was them. But Oliver luckily didn't get shot. Because we found out that basically the shot hit Glenn. It ricocheted off a plate inside of his head and then hit Zach, which I love that Williams is like, oh, Gala Atkins is still okay, you know? Because she's like, I told you guys I'd be super pissed at you if something happened to Zach. But luckily he's okay. Nothing hit the organs in that fine, yummy man. And it's just like, man, she is fiending for Zach super bad. I get it. When you have your celebrity crush, once again, I've said it time and time again, mine is Alyssa Milano. I'd probably talk about Alyssa Milano in the same vein. I get it. But the whole situation was an eye-opening situation for Oliver at the very least. And it made him go like, right, my life flashed before my eyes. And it's like, yeah, I was such a beautiful, innocent, but beautiful boy. I was talented at such a young age. It's like, shut up, Oliver. But it made him decide, you know what? I'm going to tell Loretta how I feel. And he's like, he calls her up eventually and says like, oh, right. When I was talking to you in LA, I was going to propose to you. And she just responds, ugh. Which we know that she's on part of the set. He thought she wouldn't be, but she's all bandaged up, so she probably can't really talk. So that's probably all she can, because like she's in like a full body cast for the movie. So I guess that's all she could muster in that moment, maybe. And maybe like because of the plastering of like the cast, she couldn't really move her mouth, so like is all she could say was she was trying to say something else. But sadly Oliver doesn't know that, and so he takes it as, oh man, I guess the woman I love, my soulmate, doesn't love me back, so she doesn't want to be with me. I don't want to be with her, which is sad. It's just like one thing after another of complicating this relationship. But also, really quickly, I should have started from the top. I do love how this episode is filmed. I was like, yeah, when you're able to have fun and with just how you film the episode, because basically it's from different angles and lenses and cameras. And I was like, oh, I love that, like just narratively, storytelling wise, how it is part of the narrative, but also just how the episode is filmed. And I was like, oh, that's really neat and fun way to kind of have that, because like Howard is like the main one filming our trio, and they're like, why are you filming? He's like, I'm part of the production, but they told me to keep filming. But it's like, you know, fuck the brother sister, I'm back to working with you guys or something like that. So it's like, all right, we'll keep filming you just for the purposes of all of this, because it's about filming a movie within the movie, which is interesting concept, because it's like, yeah, you're kind of filming like the behind the scenes as a movie itself, not just as behind the scenes content, but like it's its own movie in a sense. So, but yeah, they assume that they're still believing that the brother sisters are behind this, so it's like they're trying to avoid being around them. And they went to Oliver's apartment because now they're under the belief like, right, so the apartment Mabel was staying at, Dudanov's, was where the shot was fired, and they already tried to take a shot at Charles. So it's like Oliver's the only one whose apartment is fine. But now it does create this narrative. It wasn't just Saz and potentially Charles. It is now like, no, they're gunning for all three of us. So like they took their shot at Oliver. Now it's a thing of they might be coming after Mabel next, trying to figure that all out. And so I love Detective Williams just being like, turn off that damn camera, like, get it out of my face. And anytime Charles was, like, getting excited about, like, this and that, and she's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, oh, you're messing with me. And he's like, oh, you're doing it again. And for her, it's just like, right, I don't want you guys to end up dead, so basically keep yourself safe. And she's like, do you hear me? And they're like, yeah. She's like, the fuck? I love like the sass that Detective Williams has. Like, she's kind of a no nonsense, no bullshit type of person, but she also has that sass with her. I love it. Ended up giving Charles the rest of Saz's ashes or remains, and she also dropped the information that Dudanoff isn't in Portugal, he's in New York, because like there's been like charges to like, what is his card or something like that, he's been making purchases, so it's like, oh, he's back in New York. Interesting. So we think the brothers sisters did it, but then that means like maybe Dudanoff has something to do with all this because he is connected. They just didn't know how. But then while they were going through Saz's like, well, Gravy kind of accidentally gave them their next clue, because amongst Saz's remain were 2 replacement shoulders or something like that, but they're both left, so that means that there's 2 victims and not just one. Because at first I was like, oh, not unless Saz isn't actually dead and this was a fake out, but I'm like, no, I think they're pretty set on keeping Saz in, because I was just, I don't know, I kept kind of halfway expecting, like, are we going to find out someone else is dead and Saz was able to fake their death, but it's like, no, that's not the case. Their theory about it being 2 people still might be true, even, you know, by the time we get to the episode, we know it wasn't the brothers sisters, but it's like, it could be a situation of there might still be 2 killers potentially. We just don't know who it is. What was that situation? They went to, like, Bev had, like, the entire production team come together, and it's like, oh yeah, the brothers sisters won't kill us if we got cameras rolling all the time, because they don't want to get caught on camera, even though they're filming stuff too. But Bev, it's like, yeah, like, I went to see Zach. Zach told us it's A-okay, the show must go on, but then we cut to his footage, and he's like, she threatened to sue me and then proceeded to take out, like, my IV and suck out all the, like, the pain meds I had. I was like, that's sick and twisted, Bev. That's super messed up. Poor guy. Like, under a circumstance like that, can you be held? I guess you would still be breaking your contract, even though you had viable reason to break the contract. Because, hey, I almost got killed on a production. I got shot at. I don't want to do that. You know, I think that'd be enough reasonable reasons to be able to get out of that contract. But it's like, no, I'll sue you to high heaven. So it's just... So it's like, yeah, the production's still going on. We're going to use this to fuel us type of thing. So, but yeah, this episode also gave us a lot of insight to the, instead of it from the podcast perspective of like, oh yeah, these are the episodes of the podcast. This is actually the brothers, sisters, like, film, because they're like, they're doing the different acts, and we have their perspective at the beginning when we got introduced to the fact is, even as kids, they were weird. They kind of give off like the twins from The Shining. They kind of give off that same energy, but yeah, they were weird even as kids and obsessed with filming everything, especially because their teacher, their professor, their film professor, was the one that taught them to always keep rolling and never stop, and just what the beauty that can be found in the chaos of it all. And he kind of played to their weird, eccentric nature. Also, the term that Charles and Oliver were trying to look for, wasn't it? They kept saying like, "Oh, spilling the tea. We'll get them to spill the tea or spilling the tea." It's like, aren't they? What the phrase they looking for was like? I was like, you mean spilling the beans? Is that the phrase they couldn't quite get? It's like, yeah, you want to get the tea from someone, but you want them to spill something. You want them to spill the beans. You would think like that's such an old phrase. You would think as the older gentleman in the group, they would kind of snap on that. But it's like, I guess when you're around Maple, you kind of like think like, oh, spilling tea is a more young, hip phrase, even though, like, you know, it's been around for a while, but yeah. I mean, to be fair, Oliver didn't even know that rollover minutes weren't a thing anymore. He's like, what? That's why I've been so careful with my minutes for the past couple years. Because, like, Mabel's like, that hasn't been a thing for, like, 15 years. But they were watching their first student film, which led to them finding out Vince was in it, which they went to talk to Vince, and it turns out, I don't know if all of them, but at least Rudy and Vince and the brother sister are all connected to Dudinoff, because the professor, their film professor that we saw in this episode, is Dudinoff. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, tying that all together like that. That's how they all know each other. He was actually Vince was only in it because he was doing Dudinoff a favor. But also, he's like, I really wasn't an actor. Rudy, like, oh yeah, he's like, I'm an extra in Catch Me If You Can. He's like, if you look in the background, you'll find me. In fact, I actually go to the bathroom, but they're like, yeah, this scene got cut. And Vince is like, yeah, because Leo was jealous of him. Rudy's like, yeah, and also I kept staring at the camera, and then he turns to the camera, Howard's filming. I'm like, I love that. But they ended up having a drone because they got it because a lady got hit by a bus. And it's like, well, the person driving the bus actually kept going too, because there was a bus behind them too, and it was full of people. So they had to keep moving. I was like, Jesus. But yeah, they're going to use their drone to like try and spy on the brothers sisters to be able to get in there to see what's in their case. Once again, they believe it to be where they're hidden the rifle. But that didn't work out, so that didn't pan out. What was also interesting, too, is I forgot how they came to this assumption. I forgot what, like, led them to this train of thought of, right, this first victim might have been someone that's been dead for a while. In fact, it's like maybe us starting a podcast about murder, which I want to quickly interject. I love when Howard was filming Charles, and Charles had Saz's remains. He was like, oh, kind of have some respect. He's like, oh yeah, this coming from a person who makes content about people's grief. And Charles kind of looked at him, and Howard's like, sorry. I was like, ooh, shots were fired. But it's like, ooh, it is a little hypocritical, because it is a thing of, it is like, you guys, in a weird way, you do. I don't know, because also, like, I'm not trying to throw shade at people who do anything true crime related, but that true crime stuff always gets a little murky because of that. It's like, it's such murky waters, so it is such a complex. It almost feels like that line of dialogue in particular. It's like, oh, it's funny, but it's also like, ooh, it's very poignant, and you're also kind of like, oh, it's also kind of like, I don't know if necessarily like taking a shot at but pointing out something that is just kind of something that has to be considered and thought about when it comes to like true crime stuff, when you make content based on real people. It can be kind of a sticky situation, I think. But either way, because of that, they're thinking like, okay, because someone committed a murder first, and then Saz started making the podcast, and they started targeting us, and they ended up going after Saz instead of us. And it's like, I wonder, is that the through line? What's interesting though is like, I'm jumping ahead a lot, but at the end they end up confronting the brothers sisters, and it's like, yes, Dudinoff, he molded us, he crafted us, and we would do anything for him, obviously reflecting their first like student film, because he saw something in them no one else would. And it's like, yeah, their film in class, like all the other students walked away saying how disgusting it was, but he's the one that inspired them. Keep going. He gave them super 8s, inspired them to keep filming all the time. But Dudinoff basically stopped communicating with them 3 years ago because they decided to take this gig, because they were like, was it this specific gig or was it something else? Because like they came here to New York to be close to him, because they're like, oh, we know he lives in this building, and this podcast that's getting adapted into a movie, like it'd be an excuse to use this as an opportunity to get close to him. But like, I don't remember if it was this production specifically or was it just something else, but it's like he kind of saw them as selling out, so he cut off communication. That was 3 years ago, which would have been around the time the crew started their investigation in podcasting. So maybe this particular season has been 3 years in the making. And it's like, well, why wait till now to try and go after our trio? Like, why not try gunning for them sooner? Like, maybe there was something that kept them. Maybe it's because they never discovered Dudinoff's body, because that's probably why they haven't talked to him in 3 years. It's because he's actually been dead this entire time. So, which is also interesting. That means like no one has checked it, I guess, because we don't know how long, because the incinerator situation only came up recently being talked about, of like, oh yeah, like don't turn on the incinerator, it kind of like causes like blackouts or power issues in the building. But I'm like, that would mean like you never checked this for the past 3 years. I mean, that's my assumption, making it like, oh, Dudanoff died 3 years ago, but it's like that's the last time they talked to him, but maybe it is more recent. So it's like interesting. It's like, so is that the only reason why they struck now? Because Saz came across it for whatever reason, and then now they're targeting the rest of the crew because now you've stumbled across their double murder, or what? Because now you have to find out who killed Dudanoff and why, and now why Charles, Oliver, and Mabel are being now targeted. And it's like, does it all stem from the podcast? I wonder if the killer is actually a fan of the podcast who's been listening in, trying to make sure, kind of like a killer or whatever that spies on the police just to see how far the investigation gets. It's like, oh, are you closing in on me type of thing. So I'm curious if that's going to be what's this all about, because it turns out the brothers, sisters had nothing to do with this, because they were shocked to find, the moment they found out it was Dudanoff, because they would not have the motive to kill Dudanoff. They loved him. He was their everything. And also, the case they were carrying around was a camera case, because all the little cameras we've seen all around were installed by them. There's the ones that our crew was aware of because they saw them being installed, but there's also the little ones that were scattered around in everyone's apartment because they signed over their life rights. So I love tying that back in, and Mabel being like, oh, you guys told me that was no issue. I love that whole thing because like Uma was pissed about it. It's like, yeah, like they want to keep all these cameras up because any one of us could get murdered at some point in time, and she's just pissed, understandably so. And then I also love that the drone, when it crashed, it landed on top of her. She's like, what the fuck? It's like, just Uma catching all the strays. I just love that she's just popping in solely for that purpose, for her colorful commentary. And it's just like, Uma, never change. We love you being the way you are, Uma. I'm sure other people would love you not to be the way you are, kind of the, cranky person that you are, but it's like, yeah, we love you the way you are and wouldn't want you to change. But it turns out it wasn't just the brothers, sisters that had cameras installed. There was one in Charles' place, which begs the question, are there more in Oliver's place that were there? Because they were like, oh, this is like a 720 cam, we would never use that. And it turns out the killer was spying on them. The question then becomes, how long has it been there? Is it just this case, or has it been there a little bit longer and they've just never noticed, or never, like, how long has this killer been watching them? Like I said, they could be a fan of the podcast, but they could also be just, like I said, keeping an eye on them to see how close they were to figuring out the Dudanoff stuff. This might actually tie into why they shot Saz, because, were they aiming for Charles? It does seem like they really were aiming for Saz, but they're also aiming for our trio now. But it's like, yeah, they've solved 3 prior cases, so the last thing you want is them investigating your crime. So you're coming after them now. You're watching them, so they're bailing. Which I don't know if that's them heading to LA just to get away, or where they're going to go to get away from all of this. Quite an interesting development and direction for the investigation to kind of go now, because now it is this they've been in the center of the investigation, whether it's like Mabel being a suspect in season 2 and stuff like that, but it's still like the situation of you being the actual target of, it's kind of gotta be something new. Not gotta be, definitely is something new for them. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays. I'm so curious if it probably won't be until like episode 9 when you kind of figure it out, because it took me that long to figure it out last season as well, to figure out like the killer situation last season. So it's probably going to take me just as long to figure out, because I'm trying to think, like, it's been a while, so I don't remember like the season 1 and season 2 situation, how long it took me to figure out the killers in those regards. I don't remember. It's been too long. But season 3, like I said, I didn't figure it out until like episode 9. So I don't remember if I got everything right about it, but I think I figured out a decent chunk of it by then. I'm curious to see if there's going to be a repeat in this regard, or I don't know, because I don't even know who to put on the suspect list. You once again, you think it had to be someone who is part of production, but also it still feels like there is truth to the fact is, whoever shot and killed Saz, it would still need to be like a 2-man job, considering you would still need to have something in that 12-minute window, not unless their time frame of death is way off. That could always also be a possibility, but they also saw those shoes on, like, so it could have just been like from the brothers, sisters being there just because they wanted to be in the same places doing it all. But and that's also something I said last episode too, of like, it could just be like someone else happens to be wearing those shoes. Like, even Williams was like, that's not enough to get a warrant, so we'll see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, which I'm getting to this late. So, the newest episode did come out today at the time we were recording this, so it's just a matter of watching it and recording this. So. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good